Today's video is sponsored by Professor. Professor is a free application that you can download to enhance your League of Legends experience. Professor gives you a lot of information, such as how good your team is with their champions and how good the enemy team is with their champions. So, for example, if you're playing a roaming support, you can use that information to dictate what lanes to gank, what lanes to focus on. Like, for example, if you know the enemy bot lane is going to be really weak, you know, to stay down there a little bit more, and you can punish that and go for some more maybe riskier trades in order to escalate the snowballing advantage that you would have down there. At the end of the game, you get to look at the analytics, and it will tell you how well you are doing compared to the other people in your rank, so you know exactly what to focus on. Once again, Professor is a free application that you can download, and I use it in every single one of my games. You can also download Professor for free in the description down below. Hey the berries, welcome to my support Sona guide for season 12. Now this guide is particularly interesting because it has an exceptionally high win ratio at the moment. Across all rankings, this particular build for Sona has a 59% win rate, which is insane. And in Plat Plus, it is still around about 58%. So I'm going to teach you what it is, and hopefully you can replicate this into your solo queue games. Sona overall is a really easy champion to play. The hardest thing really is positioning and a little bit of passive management. Apart from that, her kit is relatively straightforward. So if you're new to my guides, what we're going to be going to go do first is runes, and then we're going to go into a practice tool. I'm going to explain the abilities if you're unfamiliar with her, and then we're going to talk about her items and any kind of like tips that you might want to learn once you've done a few games on Sona, like some mechanical tips. So this is the rune build. You can see it right in front of you. There are a couple of things that might stick out for you if you're a more experienced League player. So there's generally always been two viable builds for Sona, and that's a Summon Aerie build and a Guardian build. But the 59% win rate build that we're talking about here is a Summon Aerie build, which is fairly common anyway, and it was beforehand. So the runes there look relatively normal, but the one thing that will probably stick out the most is the conditioning. Now, the reasoning behind this is because the argument is made that the second wind and the bone plating don't really offer too much during laning phase. So the conditioning, once it kicks in at that 12-minute plus mark, it just makes you a little bit tankier to try and survive some of the assassin plays. And there's nothing really here in this tier, the tier 1 slots here, that you want to take. So it's revitalized into conditioning. In terms of the runes at the bottom, is double adaptive force into armor. You can change these up a little bit depending on what you're going up against. If you are up against, you know, double magic damage bot side, then you're obviously going to want to take the magic resistance. If you're up against something like a Brand, which is actually one of her counters for this build, so if you ever do come across a Sona, then Brand is particularly high right now. He has a 51% win rate, so is AP Lux and Zyra. They all have pretty high win ratios against Sona. They're her biggest weaknesses. You could opt into something like this just to try and tank it out a little bit more, so magic resistance for the AP support that you're playing against, and then having the armor still against the enemy AD carry. That is fine too. So you do mix those little resistant runes as you see fit. But that is the core fundamental of our rune page. Fairly simple. You'll be using this for the majority of your games, apart from maybe flicking off the armor to magic resistance. So next we're going to be heading into the practice tool. And the main summoners that are used on Sona actually for this build are Exhaust, but I would also recommend that you look into using Heal. So Heal works with the Revitalize buff that you're having from the runes. It actually increases the amount that you heal from that. And generally, if you're taking Heal, your AD carry will be taking Exhaust anyway. If you find that your AD carry, particularly in the lower ELOs, you might find that in the lower ELOs, your AD carry is going to take Summoning Heal. Then you can take Exhaust for yourself, but ideally you have Summoning Heal and your AD carry has Exhaust. So what we're going to do here is just going to give ourselves some gold, some levels. And we're going to put down a couple of target dummies. If I can find them. There we go. So Sona's kit, as I mentioned at the very start of the game, is relatively basic. There are a few advanced things that you can do, but if you're first timing support or looking to come into support, you know, and you're struggling to find an easy support to play, Sona is one of those ones that you can definitely do. So Sona's passive, so you see those three little dots above the below the health bar. As you do abilities, this bar fills up. Once you fill up the stacks, your next auto attack is empowered, and that depends on what spell you have out already. We'll cover the passive more once we've covered the basic abilities. So Sona's Q is a damaging ability. It will damage the two nearest enemies, but it will always prioritize champions. So as long as you have at least one enemy champion in this giant circle, when you Q, 2 magical bolts will come out and you basically will do damage. Now also any allies that are nearby you when you're doing this will also gain additional magic damage on their next auto attack. So this could help them last hit, this can help them harass, so yeah. Do note that the range for the ally Empower is smaller than the giant circle. So if you look at Sona's model, you'll see a little blue circle around her. As soon as we walk into an ally with that circle, that is going to give them the buff. It's just that this giant circle is indicating the damaging attack. So Q is damage. W is the main reason why you're going to be playing Sona. It is a heal and a shield. So Sona's W, she heals herself and shields herself. She also heals a nearby allied champion, prioritizing the lowest percent health. So basically the one who needs more urgently healing. The shield is granted to both herself and anyone that enters into the circle. So exactly the same as the Q. When you walk over an ally, they get shielded. So exactly the same as like with the Q. And once again, the circle for the heal is much larger. So we can heal an ally from quite a large distance. This is a very, very generous distance to heal. Sona's E is movement speed. So the circle for this is the same basically as the allied shields that we were talking about earlier. So any allied champions that you're nearby, they'll basically get movement speed. You'll be giving yourself movement speed, and if you don't take damage, it actually extends longer than it normally would. So usually it would be this would last 3 seconds, but if you don't take damage, you get this movement buff for 7 seconds. So this is really nice for moving around the map, getting from base into lane. Really nice little movement speed boost just to help around in those team fights. So now we've established that Q is damage, W is heal and shield, and E is movement speed. So when we're talking about her passive, that's going to correlate into the power chords. So because our most recently cast spell was the E, it represents the E is a purple color and our power chord underneath is purple. If we were to do a W, it would change green, and if we were to do a Q, it would change blue. Now on our next auto attack, when this bar is filled up, it will apply an additional thing based on the color. So for Q, the power chord is just flat bonus damage. It's a nice hefty chunk of damage, and you will be looking to do that for poke in the laning phase. So now the power chord W. Now this is probably the most important power chord that you're going to be doing throughout the entire game. It essentially acts as like a mini exhaust. It scales with ability power, but at low AP values, I believe it starts at 25%, and then it will scale as you get more ability power. So basically it's an exhaust that lasts 3 seconds. It reduces their physical and magical damage dealt by 25. That goes up to around about 35-ish% as the game goes on. So that once again, if you just auto attack the enemy, they'll get that debuff. Let's build up the chord again. So now the E power chord is when you land the auto attack, that's going to slow the target by a decent amount for 2 seconds. So that can be really good if you just want to help your team catch out a target. Say in the laning phase you got a jungle gank happening and you're not going to need the exhaust because the enemy is not going to turn around, and your team is going to produce more damage than what your power chord Q would do. You can use that to catch out people and, you know, force them to use summoners in order to try and get out of the situation. That's at least the first part of Sona's passive. So that is the power chord function and how that works. So remember, Q is damage, W is your heal and your shield, and E is movement speed. Now there's a little mini game now on top of the power chord. This got introduced fairly recently on Sona. So whenever you heal an ally or use the W to shield an ally that were to take damage, you gain power chord stacks. Well, it's called Accelerando, so let's just call it Accelerando. So the Accelerando stacks up when you heal an ally or block damage with the shield. You can also stack it by attacking enemy champions with your Q. And once you do that, the more stacks you have of that, that goes up all the way up to 120. Once you achieve that, that's going to give you more basic ability haste. So it's going to reduce the cooldown of your Q, W, E, the more of these Accelerando stacks that you acquire. And once you finally hit 120 stacks, every time you land one of those abilities, so whenever you do the Q poke, or if you heal or shield an ally, you will get cooldown reduction off of your ultimate. So there's a little mini game that you have to play. It's to help encourage you poking during laning phase and spamming, staying with your team essentially, and just shielding and healing them. So that will stack up over the course of the game, and will just give you basically additional cooldown reduction on your Q, W, E. When it's fully stacked, you will start getting cooldown reduction off of your ultimate. So it's huge. It's absolutely huge, the amount of cooldown reduction you can get from Sona. And we have just briefly mentioned it, Sona's ultimate. It's a short to medium ranged crowd control. So it basically stuns the targets that you manage to land it on. There's a slight delay on the cast, but it's really nice for you to enable to set up skill shots for like a misfortune or any other AoE ability that you can think of. Really nice little overlap, and also really nice defensive spell as well. Like if you've got people chasing you or your team, you can easily use this to disengage, movement speed out, shield. Because do bear in mind that this, when you're using a QWE, it doesn't interrupt your movement, so you're not having to stand still for 0.5 seconds, cast it, and then keep moving. She's very fluid in the way that she's able to move around. Now with this 59% win rate build, you're going to be maxing W first. Now that is generally against the grain of what I usually recommend on supports. And the reasoning behind that is just because Sona is incredibly squishy in lane. It's one of her biggest weaknesses. So she's weak to very strong ability power damage carries like the Zyra brand that we were talking about earlier. And she's slightly weak to some tanks. The most obvious one will be Blitzcrank. So if you find there's lots of Blitzcranks in your game, I would recommend banning Blitzcrank. But if you are up against, those magic dealers, you can still put in magic resistance in those runes. But it's really good basically just for outlasting the laning phase as much as possible. And you're not necessarily looking to harass too much with your Q. You basically want to do it with integration with the mana flow band. So right now, because we have mana flow band, every time we land our Q, it will put the mana flow band on cooldown. We'll gain 25 flat mana permanently. And then if we do that 10 times, if we gain 10 mana flow band stacks, we gain permanent missing mana regeneration. So every time this kind of mana flow band is ready, that's when we're kind of using our 1 point in Q just to harass. Also, you're building up the occasional Accelerando stacks, but generally on the whole, you're playing actually quite passively by using your W to heal and shield. And ideally you want to try and block the damage with the shield, because the shield value is slightly higher than the healing. So if you can anticipate a skill shot coming in and you can block it, then also you'll be topping up yourself and your AD carry as well. So it's a really annoying thing for the enemy to deal with. Now another downside though of this build is that it is extremely mana hungry. I'll talk about items in just a second, but I did just cover that W max first, and then you're maxing Q, and then it's E. The general skill order for a game is Q level 1, W level 2, E level 3, and then from then on you're maxing your W, taking your ultimate at 6, 11, and 16, and just taking Q when you can't put points in W. But yeah, the W is extremely mana intensive and extremely expensive. So there's mana flow band helps a little bit to offset that. But we're going to actually be adjusting our items to accommodate for this. So you will be starting Spell Thieves on Sona, but as the suggested item says, we will be taking a tier as early as possible during the laning phase. Once you have your tier, you're prioritizing your Ionian Boots of Lucidity. The reasoning behind this is, well, A, it's one of the cheapest boots in the entire game. 2, it gives you great amount of cooldown reduction. But 3, you're going to need that movement speed nice and early because Sona has no dash, and as I mentioned earlier, she is potentially vulnerable to being engaged on. So you do really need that movement speed nice and early just to make sure that you are staying alive and able to adjust positioning when needed. So this is this is what your build's going to be looking like very early on into the game. And then you'll be going into your Moonstone. Prioritize picking up the Fairy Charm as you're building this Moonstone. And then you'll be finishing off your tier into an Archangel's. And then you have 2 item choices at this point. During this point in the game, your game might already nearly be over. So everything else now from this point on is luxury. Of course, don't forget to buy control wards as you're playing the game. But if the enemy team has lots of healing, like a Soraka, or lots of kind of bruisers that have lots of healing, like Aatrox and things like that, I'm sure you're able to work it out. Chemtech is the most obvious choice to pick up and is the strongest third option. If for whatever reason the enemy team has no healing, like there's no healing at all on the enemy team, or if it is, it's extremely minor, then Staff of Flowing Water is the next best option. Just because you will be constantly healing and shielding people so much and so many targets that this item now actually becomes better. Okay, like this is the only At the moment, Staff of Flowing Water, the only champion that can use this is Sona. I would not recommend this item on anyone else. It's just purely because of how much healing and shielding she does. If the game is still going on, you're going to be strapped for cash. So at this point, I would be picking up a ward stone to further increase your ability haste. But this is generally your build. If the game is somehow still going on, grab a redemption last item. But hopefully the game isn't going on for as long as this. Just don't forget, I've been having a discussion in my coaching sessions actually. Coaching I've been doing recently for a lot of people that have been playing support that watch my streams. A lot of them admit that they've never even really heard of Wardstone, so I'm just going to cover that now really briefly. So once you hit level 13, you can buy it before then. It starts off with this Watchful Wardstone, but once you hit level 13, it will automatically convert for free into Vigilant Wardstone. And what this item has, it doesn't look like much, 150 health and 15 ability haste, but this Blessing of Ixtal is a passive that gives you 12% increased ability power, ability haste, bonus attack damage, and bonus health. So this ability haste actually stacks up quite a lot with the other support items that you have. And then also this other thing as well, the Arcane Cache and the Behold. It allows you to basically have 4 control wards on the map. Sorry, 2 control wards on the map and 4 stealth wards. So that's your 4 normal wards and 2 control wards on the map at the same time, as opposed to 3 in 1. So that gives you more vision on the map, gives you a lot of extra haste, and it's extremely cheap. It's so cheap. It's basically almost free at 1.1k gold. Super cheap item. And it's like perfect when it comes into that 3rd slot as well, because by the time you're building third item, the game is on its like near end anyway, and Baron is probably, or the dragons are going to be super contested, so this is going to help you give you vision. Also, this item stores your control wards as well, and you can have 3 control wards at the same time. So you can see the control wards that I've just bought, there's a little 3 next to the wardstone at the bottom. And that's showing that I've used them. The only reason why this item right now hasn't converted from Watchful Wardstone into Vigilant Wardstone, and it's going to be the same reason why other laners don't pick this up, is because you need a fully completed Spell Thief's Edge. So you need to complete the support quest to get 1000 gold on Spell Thieves essentially, for this to be able to convert as well. And that's why it's not working for me at the moment, because I haven't got the time to stack 1000 gold at the moment. So that covers the entire item section. So we've already mentioned kind of Sona's weaknesses, and that is that kind of potentially hook champions can be a problem, but not as bad as you think. The win ratio for Sona into those hook champions is still around about 50% with this build. So it really comes down to your kind of positioning. The main ones that she does suffer to, with around about a 48 to 49% win rate, is that Brand, the Zyra, the Zareth can be a problem too, and also so she seems to have a 50-ish% win rate against Soraka. Everything else, honestly, she just kind of just decimates for some reason. It's just, the win rates are kind of absurdly high. Even against something like a yeah, so Blitzcrank is just a flat like 50% win rate, and that, you know, Blitzcrank generally, you know, a lot of people are scared of. So if you're able just to position better and just last until that mid game to late game situation where your haste is so high from your Accelerando and from the amount of haste that you have anyway, you're going to be doing so much sustain and shielding and movement speed buffing and attack, extra auto attack damage as well from your Q, and you're going to be providing just a huge amount of utility that in those team fights, the 4v4s, or you know, the big group team fights, that is where Sona just really excels and stands out. Just make sure when you're positioning in those fights, you're generally trying to look to clump up a little bit, but you don't want to be on the front line. You want to be hanging back, playing defensively, and just being a general nuisance, because you will have a massive crosshair on your head, and the enemy team is going to want to hunt you down because you're going to be a massive pain in the butt for them. So there are some little mechanical things that I want you to be aware of when looking at playing Sona. So as mentioned with the power chord, generally power chord W is going to be your biggest priority for like 80% of the time. So in those big team fights, or even if you're being ganked, that 25 to 35% mini exhaust on your W will save your team a lot. Okay, it is so hiddenly strong. It's one of the main reasons why Sona is also incredibly amazing at the moment, just because she has an exhaust in her kit and it is relatively spammable as well. Another thing with the power chords as well, it's an auto attack reset. Let me try and show this properly. So when you have two gray stacks like this, what you can do is if you auto attack, so if I right click this minion here, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Q. So I'm going to damage the enemy, but then that also will activate my power chord and it will reset my auto attack. So what's going to happen here is going to be auto, Q, auto, but it's going to come out extremely quickly. That was just like near instant. That is the ideal trade that you're looking to do in the laning phase very early on if possible. So we're talking about level 1 to level 3, 4. But past that point, you may not necessarily be looking to do that kind of a trade. But that is particularly useful to be aware of that auto attack reset combo. If, like, for example, say we've done Q and E, and we're ready to do our little mini exhaust. You see the assassin coming towards you. If you want to try and get some sneaky extra little bit of damage, if you really want to, you can do the auto W auto in order to get the auto attack extra little bit of damage through there, which you might have already had with your power chord Q. And then you're doing your power chord W to get the mini exhaust down, just to keep the target that they're trying to jump onto alive a little bit longer. This is also really, really good for wards, clearing out enemy wards, because if you have full stacks of power chord, unfortunately I don't have an enemy ward to show you right now, but it won't deplete your power chord. So if you're attacking an enemy ward and you want to clear it really, really fast, all you have to do is auto with this full power chord bar, and then just press a QWE ability that is a different color to the one underneath. So if there was a ward, to say that there's a ward here, I would auto it, W auto, Q auto, and it would just go bam, bam, bam. Literally bam, bam, bam. It's really satisfying when you get an opportunity to do that. So I would highly recommend just doing it when you get the best opportunity to do so, just because it's so satisfying to do, to clear a ward out in pretty much maybe even under 1 second if you're fast enough to do it. In terms of other tips, some very basic things are, if you're looking to engage, you could be doing a flash auto, although that can potentially be quite slow. The flash into ulti isn't that great though, so I just showed it just there. So ideally it's still going to be flash, not like that, but flash auto, flash ulti. So flash ulti, and you can see there's a slight delay to that. Doing ult then flash doesn't work because it doesn't push your ulti up. There are some supports that it does work with, like Renata for example, but for Sona, if you do ult cast into flash, it doesn't extend the ultimate, so that's not something you really want to be doing. But you can kind of like buffer your ulti and then flash in a different direction to get away as quickly as possible. So you're not completely locked in when doing this animation when you use flash. So rather than doing flash, waiting for the animation to go off, like ulti, and then, you know, waiting for that full animation to come off, then flash, just be aware that you can flash straight away. Other than that, that's all I really want to cover with this 59% win rate Sona build. Overall, she looks like a really basic and easy champion to play, and I'm going to be honest, she is. You can utilize most of Sona's ability without really paying attention too much to her passive, but the passive usage and the positioning is what separates from a basic Sona into a really good Sona. So always manage the power chords, identify what power chords you want, whether you want more damage, you want the mini exhaust, you want the slow, and try not to get caught out too much in terms of like this enemy skill shots. I hope this guide helps you out. I still really recommend you play Sona if you are a new player or an experienced player wanting to get honestly some easy wins in solo queue right now. If you are interested in more of my support guide content, then I recommend subscribing to the YouTube channel. If you're interested in coaching, I'm currently offering free coaching to my Twitch viewers via channel points on twitch.tv/Bizzleberry. Or if you want to pay for your coaching, then Bizzleberry.com will provide you with my services and the prices and things like that. The links for the stream and my website are down below in the description. Let me know how you think I did in the comment section down below, and I look forward to bringing you another guide next week. All the best, guys, and take care.